Eleanor Grayson always imagined the end of her life as a gentle slide into twilight, sunsets on her porch, warm tea, and the comforting voices of her children echoing through her beloved home. But life rarely grants dignified exits, and betrayal never knocks. She remembered fragments at first, the cold kitchen tile beneath her cheek, her fingers clutching her chest as pain blossomed through her like wildfire. The sound of the tea kettle screaming just before the world blurred into a gray void. Then, nothing. Just blackness. A floating sensation. And silence. When Eleanor finally awoke, everything felt wrong. The bed beneath her wasn't hers. The mattress was thin, the sheets starched and synthetic. Faint antiseptic lingered in the air, mingling with the rust-like scent of age and neglect. Her limbs felt heavy, wrapped in cold, unfamiliar fabric. A flickering fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead like a dying insect. Confused, she tried to sit up but winced. A raw pain pulsed through her ribs. Where was she? Her eyes darted around the dim room. A stained curtain divided the space from a second, empty bed. The floor tiles were cracked, paint peeled from the walls. A crumpled food tray sat abandoned on a metal cart. Eleanor reached for the call button, only to find her wrist strapped lightly to the railing. Panic bloomed, sharp and immediate. A nurse eventually shuffled in, expression dull, posture weary. "Oh, you're awake," she said flatly, not bothering to check Eleanor's vitals. "Don't strain yourself, Mrs. Grayson. Just rest. You've had a heart attack. Nearly died." Nearly. But not quite. Eleanor rasped, "Where are my children?" The nurse didn't answer. Instead, she jotted something on a clipboard and left. Hours passed. Maybe days. Time warped in that place. No flowers arrived. No cards. No familiar voices. No visits. No comfort. Only silence. And the sickly echo of forgotten lives down the hall. When a social worker finally appeared, her smile was painfully forced. "Ms. Grayson," she said, as if reading from a script, "your children have made arrangements for your care. You've been transferred to Oak View Recovery Center, long-term assisted living, for your safety." Eleanor blinked slowly. "Oak View? That's one of those government-subsidized—" "Yes," the woman interrupted. "But your children thought it would be best, given your condition and current mental state." "What mental state?" Eleanor asked sharply. The woman gave a plastic chuckle. "We're not here to argue, Miss Grayson. The paperwork's already been filed." Later, a thin man in a wrinkled suit came in to have her sign something. She refused. He left the papers anyway. "It's a formality," he said. "You've already been declared legally unfit. Power of attorney now lies with your son, Daniel." Daniel. The name made Eleanor's stomach twist. Her son, the one who used to bring her daffodils from the park as a boy, the one she stayed up nights tutoring through college math, had made her disappear? That night, Eleanor sat alone in the silence, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Her mind sharpened with each breath. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about health. This was about control. About the house. My house. A home that had been in her family for 3 generations. The same house she had spent her retirement restoring. A house now empty, or worse. She began watching, listening. The staff was careless. They assumed she was too weak, too confused to notice the whispered conversations or the inconsistencies in their notes. One morning, a sympathetic janitor with cloudy eyes and shaking hands handed her a small envelope. "Think you dropped this?" he said with a wink, though she hadn't. Inside was a grainy printout of a photograph. Her son Daniel, in a crisp suit, shaking hands with a man she did not recognize, outside a law office she'd never heard of. Between them, in Daniel's hand, a stack of documents bearing her name. The walls seemed to shift. This wasn't incompetence. It was a plot. A slow, calculated betrayal. And they had underestimated her. Eleanor Grayson had taught literature for over 30 years. She understood foreshadowing, She could sense a plot twisting before it fully turned. And now all her instincts told her this wasn't care. It was containment. The sterile walls of Oakview Recovery Center echoed with the quiet, muffled suffering of those discarded by convenience, forgotten parents, widows, widowers, once vibrant minds now sedated into silence. But Eleanor wasn't ready to be forgotten. Not yet. Not like this. Her days became ritual, pretend confusion, weakness, sleep. She listened. She remembered. She observed every shift rotation, every hallway conversation, every nurse who spoke just a bit too kindly or avoided eye contact altogether. Her mind, dulled briefly by trauma and medication, was sharpening like a blade. That evening, she asked the nurse on duty for her personal file. "I just want to see what they're saying about me," she said lightly, smiling. "I'm a curious old woman. Humor me." The nurse blinked, visibly uncomfortable. I'm not authorized to." "Oh, come now," Eleanor crooned, slipping into the soft maternal tone she once used with difficult students. "Just a peek. I won't tell." The nurse excused herself. The next morning, her chart was marked combative, monitor behavior closely, so they were watching. Later that week, while being wheeled to a group therapy session she never requested, Eleanor passed the open door of the staff lounge. Inside, 2 aides were whispering over coffee. "Psychiatrist signed off 2 days after her heart attack," one murmured. "Fastest turnaround I've seen. Said she was showing signs of early dementia. But she seems fine to me." The other laughed. "Doesn't matter, her son's got the power of attorney now. Once that kicks in, it's game over. They'll sell the house before she even knows where her toothbrush is." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the wheelchair's arms. Early dementia? She had been disoriented for a few days after the heart attack. Yes, but nothing out of the ordinary. And no one had done a proper cognitive evaluation. Not one test. Not one therapist. Just silence and legal paperwork handed off behind closed doors. She was being erased. That night, she refused her medication. The nurse insisted. Eleanor pretended to swallow, then hid the pills under her tongue, later tucking them into a tissue. Her mind cleared within 24 hours. On the 3rd day, a quiet knock came at her door. A nurse she hadn't seen before entered. Tall, heavy-set with weary eyes, and a badge that read, "Ramona." There was something about her that felt different. No false cheer. No performative concern. Just quiet assessment. "I heard you asked for your file," Ramona said. "That's brave. I didn't realize curiosity was a crime." "It is here," the nurse said with a wry smile. She reached into her pocket and slipped Eleanor a folded slip of paper. "Be careful who you trust." Eleanor waited until she was alone to open it. The handwriting was tight, precise. "You were never meant to survive." Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage. It explained too much. The heart attack had come on suddenly, violently, after a perfectly normal morning. She hadn't experienced any warnings. No chest pains, no shortness of breath, nothing. Just a cup of tea, a crossword puzzle, and then blinding pain. Was it something in her drink? Something she'd eaten? Her tea bags were always on the high shelf. Someone would have had to help her that day. She tried to remember. The memory was still hazy. But it wasn't just about the attack. It was the timing, the speed, the precision. Her son had moved fast. Papers filed within days, power transferred, home listed for sale. It was as though they'd been waiting for her to fall. No planning it. And Ramona, how did she know? Was she warning her or testing her? That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She lay awake in the moonlight, filtering through the slatted blinds, staring at the ceiling tiles like constellations, her heart beating with a new kind of clarity. She would play their game, she would learn their moves, and when the moment came, she would flip the board over. Eleanor sat beneath the faded glow of the dayroom's flickering ceiling lights, feigning interest in a puzzle she had no intention of finishing. Each piece she placed down was a distraction, a deflection, a mask for the turmoil churning beneath her stillness, but her mind wasn't on cardboard fragments. It was on Ramona, the nurse who had slipped her that ominous note. "You were never meant to survive." It wasn't just a warning. It was an invitation to look deeper, to begin unraveling the sinister web that had wrapped itself around her life. And Eleanor intended to follow the thread wherever it led. Ramona returned 3 nights later, during the quietest part of the shift, the ghost hour between midnight and dawn, when Oakview's corridors emptied into silence. She knocked softly, entered without a word, and pulled the curtain around Eleanor's bed. "You were a teacher, right?" she asked, her voice low, conspiratorial. "For 32 years. You ever suspect a student of cheating before they even took the test?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Every year," Ramona nodded. "That's what it felt like. When your file came across my desk, I knew something stunk. Too clean, too fast. And your son? Daniel? I've seen his kind before." Eleanor leaned in. "Go on." Ramona hesitated. "I used to work at Shady Acres, other side of the county. Quiet place. Old money. One of our patients, Esther Bellamy, same age as you, sharp as a tack. No history of heart issues. One day, she collapses. Massive cardiac event. 2 days later, her son moves her to a private clinic in upstate New York. No contact allowed. Property sold within a week." Eleanor swallowed hard. Ramona's voice dropped further. "Her son was Daniel Grayson." A rush of cold spread through Eleanor's chest. "Esther Bellamy. I remember that name. She was on the board of the local library, donated to children's literacy. She disappeared a year ago. No one knew where she went. Now you do." Eleanor clenched her jaw. "So Daniel's done this before." Ramona nodded grimly. "You're not the first, but I'd like you to be the last." A sound interrupted them, soft but distinct. A creak just outside the door. Ramona froze, then slipped away behind the curtain, disappearing like mist. Eleanor laid back, heart thudding, pretending to sleep as footsteps moved past. The next morning, while Eleanor was wheeled to physical therapy, she met someone new. Ivy. A teenage girl in scrubs far too big for her frame, with chipped nail polish, half-dyed hair, and a look in her eyes that said she trusted no one. "Don't need a babysitter," Eleanor muttered. "Good," Ivy replied flatly. "I'm not here to hold hands." Despite the girl's prickly demeanor, Eleanor watched her closely. She was fast, observant. She handled files with practiced ease and moved through the hallways like someone used to avoiding attention. Over the next few days, Ivy grew curious about Eleanor, especially after catching her whispering with Ramona in the laundry room. "You? Planning something?" Ivy asked, arms crossed, standing in Eleanor's doorway one evening. "Would you believe me if I said no?" "Not a chance." Eleanor considered the girl. There was something raw about her, angry, caged. But clever. "What if I told you my son declared me insane, stole my house, and may have tried to kill me?" Ivy snorted. "Sounds about right. My uncle tried to do the same to my grandma. Didn't work. She caught him switching her meds." That caught Eleanor's attention. "You're not just here for community service, are you?" Ivy tilted her head, then closed the door behind her. "I'm looking for something. Or someone." And just like that, the alliance began. That night, Ivy slipped into the staff office with a borrowed keycard and returned with Eleanor's file. Together, they read every page, until Ivy's face turned pale. "Hey," she said, reaching into a folder Eleanor had never seen before. "What's this?" She held up a document. "A do not resuscitate order. unsigned, undated, but with Eleanor's name typed clean across the top. Eleanor stared at it. "I never signed this," she whispered. "I believe you," Ivy said. "But someone meant to." The discovery of the unsigned DNR form left Eleanor shaken. Not because of what it meant, she'd already begun to suspect far worse, but because of how carefully it had been placed among her records, as if waiting for someone to give it life. A single signature away from sanctioned silence. But now Eleanor had something her children hadn't expected. Allies. Ramona, the embittered nurse who had seen too much to look away. Ivy, the sharp-tongued girl with a grudge and a talent for slipping past locks. Together, they formed the beginning of a counterattack. But Eleanor knew they needed more. Someone who could understand the legal labyrinth her children had used to trap her. She needed Lena Matthews. Once, Lena had been Eleanor's closest friend, inseparable since their high school days. They'd shared dorm rooms, secrets, even heartbreaks. Lena had gone on to become a paralegal, working for one of the most reputable estate law firms in the county. Until she vanished. 7 years ago, she disappeared from Eleanor's life with no warning. One day, texts went unanswered. Calls rang hollow. Rumors whispered that Lena had been caught up in a legal scandal, something about forged documents and hush money. But Eleanor never believed it. Not really. Now she was the only person Eleanor could think of who might understand how Daniel and his accomplices had orchestrated this betrayal so precisely. Using Ivy's smuggled phone and a burner SIM, Eleanor began the search. It took 2 days. Lena was living 3 towns over, under her maiden name. She'd left law behind completely. A tiny house, no social media, no trace, unless you knew exactly where to look. On the 3rd night, Ivy knocked on Eleanor's door after hours and handed her the phone. "She's on the line." Eleanor's heart pounded as she brought the phone to her ear. "Lena?" A pause. Then, softly, "Ellie?" The years fell away. "It's me, I need your help." A longer silence followed. Then Lena asked one question. "Is it about Daniel?" Eleanor swallowed. Yes. That was all it took. 2 days later, Lena appeared in person at Oakview, her hair streaked with gray now, face tired but sharp. She signed in as a legal consultant, thanks to a favor from Ramona. As they embraced for the first time in years, Eleanor whispered, "I never stopped wondering where you went." Lena smiled faintly. "And I never stopped waiting for a reason to come back." In the quiet of the empty art therapy room, they talked. Eleanor laid out everything. Her sudden heart attack, the fake dementia diagnosis, the power of attorney, the discovery of the unsigned DNR, and the mounting suspicion that Daniel had done this before. Lena listened carefully, nodding. It's textbook, fast-track guardianship with a psychiatrist in someone's pocket. Then the sale of assets? Usually before the patient even understands what's happening. Your name still holds weight, Eleanor. They moved fast because they knew if you had time, you'd fight back. She pulled out her laptop already prepared. Let's start with the deed transfer. If they've sold the house or even listed it, we'll see a trail. Hours passed, and then Lena froze. "There it is," she whispered, pointing at the screen. Eleanor leaned in. Her eyes scanned the records. The house had already been appraised and conditionally sold to an entity named Garrison Properties LLC, a shell company used in 4 other elder property seizures. But it wasn't the buyer that chilled Eleanor. It was the signature on the sale document. Her name. Perfectly written. But she'd never signed it. Lena printed the record, her expression grave. "This is a forged deed, Eleanor. And here's the kicker. Whoever signed it used my name as a witness." Eleanor recoiled. "Your name?" Lena nodded. "Daniel's not just targeting you. He's using my past, my disgraced name, to make sure no one questions the paperwork. And if this surfaces, it'll look like I was involved again." Eleanor stared at the page, her blood cold. "He's rewriting the story, making me the crazy one. You, the criminal, and himself the grieving son, doing his best. But now she had proof. A forged deed, a falsified witness, and a friend who wasn't afraid to face her past. Eleanor folded the paper with trembling fingers and looked up at Lena. Then we don't just fight back, we burn it all down. Eleanor sat in the cramped corner of the recovery center's common room, her fingers tracing the grain of a hollowed-out book Lena had brought with her. It was an old, worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, a favorite from Eleanor's teaching days, but today it was something else, a safe. Inside the secret cavity, wrapped carefully in yellowed parchment, was the original will. Her will. The one she had rewritten just weeks before the heart attack, while she still had full control and clarity. The ink was slightly faded but unmistakable. In bold, precise handwriting, it stated clearly, her house was not to go to her children. Instead, it was to be bequeathed to a local charity focused on helping elderly abuse victims, the very group she had quietly supported for years. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She remembered the night she had signed it, the quiet satisfaction of doing the right thing, protecting her home, preserving her legacy for those who truly needed it. But then the heartbreak, the betrayal. The house was gone. The will she'd seen filed at the courthouse, her children's will, was a forgery. The real one, the testament to her intentions, had disappeared. Someone hid this away, Lena said quietly, breaking Eleanor's reverie. They knew if it surfaced it would unravel everything. Eleanor nodded slowly. I thought I had prepared for this. But Daniel, he moved faster than I expected. Lena frowned, her fingers tapping against the parchment. They probably destroyed the real will. Or maybe they're holding on to it somewhere. The question hung in the air. That night, Ivy called Eleanor with news that sent a fresh wave of panic crashing through her chest. There's a copy, Ivy said breathlessly, voice barely above a whisper. Not the original, but a copy, half-burned. Found it in my locker after someone broke in. Someone tried to destroy it. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the phone. Where is it now? Safe. For now. Her heart pounded. If they could get their hands on even a fragment of the will, they could alter it, forge it, or bury it forever. Eleanor realized she was no longer just fighting to reclaim a house. She was fighting to reclaim her truth. The next day, Eleanor, Lena, and Ivy gathered in the dim light of the care center's small library. The burnt copy was fragile, the edges blackened and crumbling. Parts of the text were illegible, but enough remained to confirm its authenticity. As Eleanor ran her finger along the faded ink, memories flooded back. Late nights writing the letter to her lawyer, the cautious hope she'd felt after signing the new will, the faith that at least some part of her legacy would survive. But the charred will was a symbol of more than just her stolen property. It was proof of a deeper conspiracy, a ruthless family willing to erase everything, including Eleanor's voice. We're dealing with professionals, Lena said grimly. They know exactly how to cover their tracks. We'll need more than just this to fight back. Eleanor's mind raced. She thought of Ramona's warning, the forged deed Lena had uncovered, Ivy's courage to dig deep. The pieces were slowly coming together, forming a picture of greed, betrayal, and cold calculation. She also knew the most dangerous part was still ahead. Exposing these crimes meant confronting her family face to face and risking everything. Her children were no longer just estranged. They were enemies. That night, Eleanor looked out the small window, the city lights twinkling distantly. Her home was out there somewhere, not far away, but to her it felt like a fortress surrounded by enemy forces. But she wouldn't give up. She would find the real will. She would reclaim her house, and she would expose every lie that had been spun around her. Because Eleanor Grayson was no longer the woman who had collapsed on her kitchen floor. She was a force to be reckoned with. The evening air was crisp and sharp as Eleanor, Lena, and Ivy approached the house that had once been her sanctuary, the place where laughter echoed through halls and memories were stitched into every corner. Now it stood empty, its grand facade stripped bare by silence and betrayal. It was an estate showing, open to potential buyers. The house was staged, cold and unfamiliar, dressed in bland, neutral colors that erased the warmth Eleanor had nurtured for decades. A sleek for sale sign swung gently on the lawn, mocking her with its finality. They had to move fast. Eleanor's heart pounded as Lena picked the lock of a side door with expert precision. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of fading sunlight. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and polished wood, but beneath it, something darker lingered, neglect and secrets. They slipped inside, eyes scanning for anything useful, anything that could tip the scales back in Eleanor's favor. In the main living room, pristine furniture sat arranged in cold symmetry. It was a house staged for strangers, not a home. Eleanor's footsteps echoed softly as she moved through the rooms, each one dredging memories. Her fingers brushed over the mantel where family photos once stood, now replaced by empty frames. In the upstairs master bedroom, Ivy rifled through drawers. "Found something," she whispered. She pulled out a small bottle of pills, unmarked and unfamiliar. Eleanor stared at them. "I've never been prescribed these." Lena examined the label, brow furrowed. These could be dangerous. Sedatives or something stronger. The thought sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. Was this another weapon in the arsenal used to keep her incapacitated? As they explored further, Lena's hand struck something hard beneath the floorboards, a voice recorder, thin and almost invisible beneath the faded carpet. Lena picked it up and pressed play. Static filled the room at first. Then a distorted voice whispered, almost inaudibly, "She won't wake up next time." Eleanor's breath caught. The words were a chilling promise, one that made every shadow in the house feel alive and watching. "Who could have recorded this?" Ivy asked, voice low. "And why leave it here?" "It's a message," Lena said. "Left for you. Or from you. Maybe both." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps outside snapped their attention toward the windows. "We're not alone," Ivy hissed. They scrambled to hide as two men in suits walked up the driveway, likely real estate agents or representatives from Garrison Properties. They spoke in clipped tones about closing dates and offers, completely unaware of the intruders in their future client's home. Eleanor felt a bitter surge of anger. This was no longer just a sale. It was a theft of identity, history, and dignity. When the men left, the trio slipped out the back door, the cold night air a harsh reminder of how far Eleanor had been pushed. Back at the care center, Eleanor lay awake, the voice recorder's whisper echoing in her mind. She realized this house, once her refuge, was now a battleground, a place where every corner held secrets and every silence screamed betrayal. But Eleanor was no longer powerless. She would shine light into those shadows. And she would fight. The morning after their infiltration of Eleanor's house, a thick tension clung to the air at Oakview Recovery Center. Eleanor stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Wrinkles etched deep into her brow, silver hair pulled back, eyes sharper than they had been in months. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was calculating. Down the hall, Lena sat with her laptop balanced on her knees, digging deeper into Garrison Properties, Daniel's contacts, and any traces of the conspiracy they had uncovered. Ivy, curled in a nearby chair with earbuds hanging loose from her collar, scrolled through encrypted forums she claimed no one in the real world knew how to access. It wasn't until Lena's fingers stilled on the keyboard that the silence became heavy. "Eleanor," she said slowly, turning the screen toward her, "there's something you need to see." It was an old adoption record, buried deep within a closed court database. Marked confidential. Dated 35 years ago. Eleanor leaned forward, her breath catching in her throat. The name, Daniel Grayson. Under biological parents, redacted. "Lena, what is this? You didn't adopt him?" Eleanor stared, stunned. "No, Daniel is mine. I carried him. I raised him." Lena shook her head. "This says otherwise." It appears your late husband filed a private adoption under his name. You weren't listed on the paperwork." The room spun, memories crashing through her like waves. Her husband Graham had always been secretive about Daniel's early years. She had chalked it up to trauma. Daniel had arrived at only 6 months old after a complicated early custody dispute. That's what Graham told her. That's what she believed. "What are you saying?" Eleanor whispered. "I think Daniel was brought into your life under false pretenses, and not by accident." The betrayal settled deep in her bones. Her whole life had been shaped around a child who may have been placed in her care for reasons she never questioned. And now, that same child, not hers by blood, was trying to erase her. Ivy stepped in quietly, holding a printout. "It gets worse." She laid out a series of property transfers. 4 different elderly homeowners across the state, all of whom had been declared mentally unfit, moved into care homes, and had their estates purchased by Garrison Properties LLC. One signature appeared on 3 of the 4, Daniel Grayson. "He's not just doing this to you," Ivy said. "This is a pattern. It's an operation." Eleanor's lips trembled. "He built a business model out of destroying lives." Her stomach turned. Was Graham part of it? Had her marriage, her motherhood, been a smokescreen for something far darker? The questions piled high, too heavy to answer. That afternoon, Eleanor's private rage nearly boiled over when she received an unexpected visitor. Daniel. He strolled into the day room like a man returning to check on a prized investment. Perfectly dressed, all charm and surface warmth. "Mom," he said, kissing her on the cheek. "You look good." "I am good," she said evenly. "More than you expected, I imagine." His smile faltered. "I'm here because there are a few more forms to review, some things the facility needs before we can proceed with the next phase of care." She narrowed her eyes. "And what phase is that? Palliative?" He chuckled, but there was an edge to it. "Come on, Mom, you don't need to get dramatic." But Eleanor was watching every movement, every twitch of his lips. Daniel wasn't visiting out of concern. He was nervous, slipping. She followed his gaze toward the hallway, where Ivy was loitering, half hidden behind a stack of boxes. Ivy, bless her brave, impulsive soul, had been watching, recording. But just as Daniel stood to leave, he spotted her. "Ivy," he said sharply, smile gone. "What are you doing here?" Ivy froze. Eleanor tried to intervene, but Daniel's mask dropped in a flash. He stalked toward Ivy and yanked the phone from her hand. "Nosy little girls get people hurt," he muttered under his breath. Then he turned, gave Eleanor a last, venomous smile and left. Eleanor reached out and gripped Ivy's trembling hand. "He knows," Ivy whispered. "He knows we're on to him." Eleanor looked at the burned copy of the will, the pill bottle from her house, and the deed with Lena's forged name. "Let him come," she said quietly. "Because the truth is coming for him." For hours after Daniel's unexpected visit, the recovery center felt like a prison with invisible walls. Eleanor sat motionless in her chair, hands folded tightly in her lap, as the realization set in. He knew. Their investigation was no longer in the shadows. They'd been exposed. Ivy had barely spoken a word since Daniel confiscated her phone. Her defiant posture was gone, replaced by hunched shoulders and darting eyes. She stayed at the edge of the room, avoiding Eleanor and Lena's gazes, fiddling with the frayed hem of her oversized hoodie. Eleanor watched her from across the day room, a slow dread forming in her chest. Ivy, the street-smart, rebellious girl who'd once declared war on every authority figure in sight, was now a ghost of herself. That night in Eleanor's room, the silence between them grew too loud to ignore. "Ivy," Eleanor said gently, "what happened today?" Ivy didn't look up. "I messed up. We all make mistakes. But I need to know what he said to you." Silence. Then a whisper. "I already knew what he was going to say. He didn't have to say it." Eleanor felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Ivy pulled something from her pocket. A torn photograph. It showed an older woman in a hospital bed, pale and thin. Her eyes were shut, but there was something unmistakable in her features. She resembled Ivy. "That's my grandma," Ivy said. "Her name's Melinda. She's in another facility. Daniel's company owns it now. Garrison Health Services. He's been threatening to move her to a state ward if I didn't cooperate." Eleanor's breath caught. "You've been giving him information," Ivy nodded, tears finally falling. "Only bits at first. Schedules, staff routines. He said it wouldn't hurt you. That he just needed to know if you were declining. I didn't know what he was really doing, I swear. And the phone? He planted a tracker on it the last time I saw him. I didn't realize until it was too late." Eleanor's mind reeled. Ivy had been feeding Daniel breadcrumbs, unknowingly opening the door for him to strike. The visit to her house, the near discovery of the real will, even the timing of Daniel's visit today, it had all been orchestrated through Ivy. "I didn't mean to," Ivy choked out. "I just wanted to protect my grandma. She's all I have." Eleanor closed her eyes. She wanted to scream, to rage, but instead she took a breath. "You're not the only one who's been used," she said quietly. Ivy wiped her eyes. "So that's it? You're done with me?" Eleanor looked at her, this broken, desperate girl who'd been forced into betrayal by fear. A younger version of herself might have cast her out. But the Eleanor sitting here now had survived too much betrayal to let another person fall into the void. "No," Eleanor said, "I'm not done with you, but you need to understand. Daniel's not just dangerous. He's calculating. And he's used people before. Good people." Ivy blinked. "Used? You mean like Ramona?" The name hit Eleanor like a slap. "I know," Ivy added quickly. "I didn't say anything because I thought maybe you already knew. But when Ramona worked at Shady Acres, she was on Daniel's payroll." Eleanor stood abruptly, the floor spinning for a brief second. "That can't be true." "It was. I found documents, money transfers. She was helping him institutionalize people. Back then. Maybe she's changed. But maybe not." The room seemed to contract around Eleanor. Ramona, who had warned her, protected her, given her the first clue. Had she truly turned against Daniel? Or was she playing both sides? Lena entered just then, sensing the tension. Ivy didn't speak. She simply handed her the photo of her grandmother and whispered, "I'm sorry," before slipping out the door. Eleanor slumped into her chair. The battle lines had blurred. Allies were tainted. Enemies wore masks. She looked to Lena. "How do we win a war when we don't know who's fighting beside us?" Lena's reply was soft but certain. "By being smarter than every last one of them." Eleanor clenched her fists. No more surprises. It was time to set the trap. Eleanor Grayson had been underestimated her entire life. As a teacher, she'd watched the world pass her by with polite nods and empty platitudes, people assuming her worth ended at the classroom door. As a mother, she'd poured everything she had into her children, only to watch them twist her love into leverage. And now, as a recovering heart attack patient, she'd listened to strangers describe her as frail, confused, and past her prime. But today, that narrative ended. It began with a plan. A trap, really. If they were going to take back her life, Eleanor had to play the role Daniel had written for her one final time, and then flip the script in front of everyone watching. She and Lena called it the lesson. A staged relapse, a controlled collapse, and one chance to draw the puppeteer into the light. Ramona, still under scrutiny but useful, would help set the stage. Ivy, now trying desperately to earn back trust, would play the decoy. It all hinged on one performance, and Eleanor had taught enough drama students to know how to deliver a scene. The day unfolded like a well-rehearsed act. At 10 a.m., Eleanor began stumbling in the hallway, clutching her chest. At 10:15, Ivy created a commotion outside the staff room, drawing attention away from the security monitors. At 10:22, Ramona triggered a medical escalation alert, flagged to Daniel's email as Eleanor's legal guardian, and at 10:45 a.m. he arrived. He strode into Oakview with false concern painted on his face. The facility director, conveniently delayed by Lena with a fabricated complaint, left him alone with Eleanor. She lay in bed, eyes closed, heartbeat slow but steady. Monitors hummed. Electrodes were attached, but the machine had been set to loop a pre-recorded heartbeat. Daniel sat beside her, fingers tapping on his phone, distracted, until the door clicked shut. Eleanor's eyes opened. "I didn't die," she said. Daniel jolted, looking up. The fake tenderness dropped from his face like a mask. "So," he said coolly, "this is the game now?" "No," she replied, voice calm. "This is the lesson." Daniel started to stand, but the door remained closed. From the corner of the ceiling, a red light blinked. "I've been recording for the last 10 minutes, Eleanor said. Daniel scoffed. "You think that'll hold up in court? You're not even considered competent. That diagnosis won't go away because you flipped a few switches." She smiled. "That's where you failed, Daniel. You thought I was broken. But I've been documenting everything. The pills in the drawer, the forged will, the adoption file, the deed with Lena's forged signature, even the unsigned DNR." He hesitated. "You're bluffing." The lights flickered. And then, power cut. Darkness swallowed the room. The recorder blinked once, and stopped. A scream echoed from the hallway. A staff member shouting for help. Eleanor bolted upright. "No! No!" Lena burst into the room seconds later, out of breath, her coat stained, her eyes wide with horror. "She's down!" Lena gasped. "Someone attacked me in the hallway. I must have blacked out. When I woke up, the will was gone." Eleanor stood, every inch of her trembling. "Did they take it?" "I don't know," Lena panted. "But it was in my coat. Someone knew where to look." Daniel stood quietly in the corner, eyes unreadable. "Convenient," he said. "Another accident." Lena's eyes flashed. "You're not getting away with this." "No," Daniel said calmly, brushing off his sleeves. "I already have." He turned and walked out, leaving the three women in the suffocating silence of defeat. The power returned moments later, lights buzzing back to life. But the damage was done. The recording? Cut mid-confession. The original will? Gone. Eleanor sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, heart pounding. Not from illness, but fury. The trap had been set. The predator had entered. But somehow, he had slithered out again. "I'm sorry," Lena whispered. "I never even saw his face. But whoever it was, they knew what they were doing." Eleanor nodded slowly. "No more playing defense," she said. "If he wants war, we give him fire." 3 days after Lena was found unconscious in the hallway of Oakview, Eleanor stood at the edge of a media storm. The original will was gone. The voice recorder had captured nothing usable. The care center had conveniently lost all internal security footage from that day due to a, quote, power failure. And Daniel? He was nowhere to be found. But if he thought that meant victory, he had gravely underestimated the woman he'd tried to erase. Eleanor sat tall in a wheelchair before a semicircle of flashing cameras and microphones. Journalists murmured in anticipation, many drawn by the dramatic headline Ivy had fed to every inbox in the region. Elderly woman claims family faked her insanity to steal her home, and she has the documents to prove it. She had no more time for whispered threats or hidden games. This was war, and her story was now her weapon. With Lena resting in a hospital bed and Ivy by her side, Eleanor stepped into the spotlight, not as a victim, but as a woman who had survived. "I was declared incompetent without evaluation," she said, voice steady. "I was institutionalized against my will. My house was sold, my accounts were emptied, my will was destroyed, and I believe my heart attack may not have been natural." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ivy handed out copies of forged deeds, court petitions, DNR forms, and even the partially burnt will. Ramona, who had confessed everything in exchange for full immunity, submitted a signed affidavit detailing her work with Daniel's elder abuse operation. Her statement described how she'd been lured in with high pay, then silenced by blackmail. Eleanor had left nothing to chance. The media firestorm spread quickly. #JusticeForEleanor trended online. Elder rights activists reached out. Investigations were launched into Garrison Properties LLC, revealing a disturbing trail of vanished seniors and hastily signed power of attorney transfers. But it wasn't until Eleanor walked into court that the tides truly turned. She wore a navy blue suit with pearl buttons, simple, dignified, commanding. Ivy walked beside her, holding a folder stuffed with evidence. Lena, thinner but determined, sat behind them in the gallery, bruises fading but eyes bright. Daniel sat on the other side of the courtroom, his expensive lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. He looked pale, rattled, cornered. The judge, an older woman with a reputation for no-nonsense proceedings, raised a brow. "Ms. Grayson, I understand you've chosen to represent yourself today." "I have, Your Honor," Eleanor replied calmly. "I was a teacher for over 3 decades. I think I'm qualified to present a few facts." The courtroom chuckled lightly, but the tension was unshakable. Eleanor laid out her case in calm, deliberate pieces. A suspicious heart attack with no underlying conditions. A forged medical declaration of dementia. A deed signed with a falsified witness name. A will that mysteriously vanished after her incapacitation. And finally, a string of elder victims, all linked to her son and his associates. Daniel's attorney objected, called it speculative, claimed emotional manipulation. Then Eleanor handed the judge a simple sheet of paper. "This," she said, "is the property record for my house." The judge frowned. "It shows that ownership was transferred to a private trust nearly 2 months before your hospitalization." "Correct," Eleanor said. "I created the trust after revising my will. I just didn't tell my children. I wanted to protect the house from probate or contest." She turned and looked Daniel in the eye. "So they never owned the house? Not legally? They stole something that was never theirs to take." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Daniel stood abruptly. "You're lying." "No," Eleanor said softly. "I just finally stopped trusting the wrong people." The judge adjourned the session for deliberation. But it was already clear. By the time the ruling came, Eleanor had won back more than her home. She won back her name. Daniel was charged with fraud, elder exploitation, and conspiracy to defraud. Garrison Properties collapsed under federal investigation. The care facility was put under new management, and Eleanor became a local symbol of resilience. Her story shared in advocacy campaigns and televised panels. Weeks later, she stepped into her restored home, sunlight washing over hardwood floors and windows that no longer looked out on Betrayal. But it wasn't over. Because sitting on the windowsill was a single red rose, and beneath it, a note. Eleanor unfolded the small slip of paper. The handwriting was familiar. Achingly so. "I never meant for it to go this far. I did what I had to do. Forgive me if you can. G." Her breath caught. Graham. Her late husband, dead and buried for nearly a decade. Or so she thought.